to reach out to artists from different parts of the world itself, and to get to know about their experience. So for the participants, it's a golden opportunity, which in some sense the technology is itself providing, that we are able to get in touch with renowned artists from different fields. And here we have today a renowned poet, Sri Sanjeev Kaushal. और मुझे लगता है कि इस प्लेटफॉर्म से जैसे आपकी एक्सपीरियंसेस है, जो पोएम राइटिंग और जो कविता, उसमें जो भी अभी तक आपने जो लिखा है और उससे जो भी एक्सपीरियंस है, वो अगर आप हमसे शेयर करेंगे तो दैट विल बी अ टेक अवे फॉर पीपल हु आर इंटरेस्टेड और हु हैव been having some kind of interest in writing, especially the poetic writing. And more than a competition, obviously a competition hai, but like how to go beyond that. Any art form, we believe it has to serve a purpose, which is to communicate with the society which we live in, to interact with people, so that in some sense we can work towards making or building a better society. And the whole workshop here today is aiming for that, or is meant for this purpose. So without any further delay, I would like to welcome Sri Sanjeev to kind of interact with us. And just before that, and just before the speaker starts, I would like to request the participants to keep their mic and their video off. And like we'll have the speaker talk for around 40-45 minutes. And yeah, and then if there are questions, the participants can raise their hands. There is an option for raising your hand that can be done, and then you can ask your questions or give your comments. Sir, so I welcome you, and then you can start. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interact with people. Though I can't see actually any of them, but it's fine. They can hear and see me at the same time. So poetry is something which I live with. It is something which never leaves me. Okay, so and it is not just with me, but I suppose this is with almost everybody who writes, whether poetry or fiction or whatever genre he works in or she works in. So I mean, if you are willing to write something, then it has to be, or it has to become a kind of overriding passion. Okay, only then you can think of writing something worthwhile. So I mean, this is what I feel. I mean, it is not something which, as a fashionable thing, can be done and can be achieved. It is a serious thing, and it should be done with all kind of seriousness. Why I'm saying it is serious? Because you are trying to create a world out of nowhere. Okay, so you are actually, it's only the language that is given to you, and out of this language you create a world which replaces the real world. Language creates in its own world. So with all its nuances, with all its dimensions and complexities, it is difficult to replace the real world. But then the writer creates, and sometimes he creates a world which seems even more fascinating. It's more charming. So this is the beauty of the writer, and then he has to undergo a process of learning these skills. So as I'm saying, it is something which can be learned. So there are two aspects of poetry. Okay, one, and in fact we can divide this into three parts. The first is definitely means your response to the world. So when you respond to the world, you think of something, and then I mean, if something is happening in the world, even if you see a flower, a beautiful flower, or anything happening around you, so it may be the beauty, or it may be something else that strikes you. So the moment you feel that something is catching your attention, okay, is calling for some kind of attention, so then you if you are a if you are a I mean theorist, then you would kind of theorize it. If you are a story writer, then you will try to gather more information about the thing, and then you will create a story. But if you are a poet, then you will have an immediate response. Okay, because in poetry, though there are poems which may be very long, but generally poems are of a small size. So the kind of place, the kind of space that you are provided in poetry is slightly small. So within that is that space that you have been provided, you are supposed to say something which can draw the attention of other people. So if you look at it, I mean, हम किसी चीज को देखते हैं और हम उससे ऐसा लगता है कि ये चीज हमें बहुत अच्छी लगी, और उस चीज से हमारा जो रिस्पॉन्स है वो पोइटिक रिस्पॉन्स कब बनेगा, इस पे हम बातचीत करेंगे. लेकिन बट देयर इज अ रिस्पॉन्स, आई मीन वी feel that something has to be said about this particular thing. It should not be left unnoticed. So if there is a photographer, he will immediately click a photo, or I mean any kind of you want to capture that moment. So it is like capturing the moment. So how would you capture that moment? It is this is important. And if and people write things, but they do not catch the attention of the other people, I mean they are not readable things. Your friends may be interested in reading them, your family members may be interested in reading them, because their child has done something. But uh, will a common reader read that? That is important. So so as I told you, there are three important areas. First is because it is a response that we give to the uh, incident that takes place outside us. Okay, it may be out inside us also, but generally, I mean, we see this like that. Then the first is the thought. Okay, there is something which hits us, and then we start thinking about it. Okay, so thinking process, I mean, thought is something which cannot be eliminated at all. There are uh, poems, and there have been movements in poetry which try to sideline uh, the thought part, but it is extremely important. So our response cannot be without an idea. So idea has to be there, something which provokes us, something that uh, kindles that fire, that is spark. So, and second is the emotional component. Okay, so poetry cannot be dry. Prose can be dry sometimes, but poetry cannot be dry. It may be any kind of response. It may be a satire, it may be humor, it may be any kind of thing. But there has to be some feeling. So feeling and thought, and the third component is the writing. Okay, so it is all there in our mind. I mean, before we actually write down our response on a piece of paper, the thought is there, the emotion is there, but the poetry is not there. So poetry becomes poetry, or the idea that is there in our mind becomes poetry only when it appears on the piece of paper. Okay, so is this fine? I mean, are you getting this? Anyone can, because unless until I know that anyone can respond, those who are the participants.
Sir, clear to have, we are able to, I mean, listen to you clearly. Maybe if participants want to reaffirm, otherwise
If
you can
any can,
speak in
anyone
later
can.
on.
Yes, yes. If
Ah,
anyone can switch on the camera, because I can see the face. Otherwise, it becomes, I mean, really difficult
yeah,
for. So it would be
yes, yes.
better if any of you can just switch on the camera. so that I can see the expressions at least and get to know. So
Yeah,
such
actually,
important.
there was a request from our side to switch off the camera to kind of avoid any kind of distraction. But now I'll
No,
request people
no,
to
no,
switch
it
on.
is.
If people
It's not
find maybe
distraction.
some,
Yes.
हाँ, अगर कोई लोग मतलब प्रॉब्लम नहीं है तो you can switch on your camera and keep your mic muted so that we can have a good interaction. Yes, so you can continue.
Well, fine. So, though I can't see anyone. Uh, तो कई सारी डेफिनेशंस, एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग बात है पोइट्री के बारे में। जैसे आप लोग किसी चीज को डिफाइन करते हैं, किसी भी चीज की जो डेफिनेशन है, वो मोर और लेस आपको समझ आती है, और कोई भी यूनिवर्सल डेफिनेशन जो है वो ऐसा लगता है कि इज पॉसिबल टू क्रिएट, but with poetry it becomes so difficult. There are millions of writers, millions. I mean, there have been millions of writers, and still there are thousands of writers who are seriously working in different languages. But if you ask any of them, they will all have their own kind of definitions. Okay. Definitions which satisfy their endeavor in language. Okay. So it means poetry is something which defies any kind of form. Okay. So I mean, it is something amorphous. It is something which evades any form. The moment you try to capture it, or try to define it, it evades that. So it remains elusive. It remains always out of our reach. So this is important. And uh, one line can be poetry, or 100 lines may not be poetry. Okay. So what is that which defines, or which creates, or which makes something poetic? Okay. So there are several. Okay. So there are several writers who have been accepted worldwide as great poets. Like we have studied Wordsworth as one of the greatest poets. Okay, English poets. So when I was studying him in my graduation years, so there was a definition which was something like, which everybody knew, that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So he talks about spontaneous overflow means something which flows spontaneously without any problem, and then he says that spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. If you feel something powerfully, and if it flows out, these feelings flow out of you, then it is poetry. So he majorly focuses on the emotional part, the feelings. Okay. He says that this is poetry. And then there is a poet like Ezra Pound or T.S. Eliot, and he says that poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. So he's entirely different from what Wordsworth has suggested. And it is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. So, I mean, at one place, there are people who talk about an individual, or talk about the emotions or the response that you have as an individual. Okay, and your individuality can be easily detected. Okay, but at the same time, there are other writers who say that individuality, or the personality of the writer, or the views of the writer, or the emotional response of the writer has to be suppressed. Okay, so it should not be an emotional outburst. Okay, but something else. So it means there are two approaches, apparently two approaches. One approach focuses on emotion. The second approach focuses on the thought. Okay, so and when he says that it is not turning loose of emotion, it means one has to control the emotion. And at the same time, but it doesn't mean that poetry will not evoke any emotion in you. He's saying that the poet has to control the emotions, and the poetry, when the reader reads it, the poetry should be able to create those emotions in the reader. Okay, so poet himself should not be emotional. So there is a difference in that. I mean, uh, if you start crying, okay, nobody will listen to you. But if you create something, if you write something which is uh, I mean has that appeal, that others start crying, then it will be called a great piece. So these two things are important. I mean, these are two different aspects. But then there are other definitions also of poetry. Like there is a very famous definition which we find in Sanskrit, रसात्मक वाक्यम काव्यम, कि जो वाक्य में रस होता है, रस की अलग अलग डेफिनेशंस दी गई संस्कृत में, कि वो वीर रस है, हास्य है, या किस तरह का रस है, और अगर उनसे वो इमोशंस क्रिएट हो रहे हैं, 9 तरह के उन्होंने रस बताए, और उन्होंने कहा कि अगर ये सब हो रहा है, तब किसी भी वाक्य को हम पोइट्री कह सकते हैं। ओके, तो इसका मतलब है कि काफी कुछ एरियाज ऐसे हैं जो आपको मतलब आपको एक लेवरेज मिलती है, छूट मिल जाती है, जहाँ पे आप अपनी तरह से कुछ क्रिएट कर सकते हैं। और शायद यही वजह है कि पोइट्री की इतनी सारी डेफिनेशंस, इतने तरह के इंटरप्रिटेशंस पोइट्री के हैं, और अलग अलग लोग अलग अलग तरह से मतलब दोज हु feel that Wordsworth was right, that emotional response is more important, and those who feel that it has to be away from emotion. We cannot compartmentalize poetry or all the poems like this. Even if you have an emotional response at one place, it is possible, completely possible, that the same writer may have a different kind of response to a different subject matter. Okay, so sometimes it depends on the subject matter. Okay, and sometimes, and most of the time, the subject matter itself decides or sometimes dictates you to take a particular approach. Okay, so these are the things. Now, I'll give you some examples. And Poetry, uh, if you see, nothing survives longer than poetry. I was listening to one Kabbali in the morning, Kahe ko Byahi Videsh, Babul Mure. So there is a Kabbali by this heavy painter Kabbal, and this was written by Khusro. Khusro was in 13th century, and still, I mean, we use him in modern films. So even after 700 years, he is still relevant after 800 years. And there are lines which are, I mean, too very powerful. So poetry is something which remains, uh, active or potential for a very, very long period. How does this happen? We'll talk about that, and how any writer creates that kind of magic which remains magic. There was a poet, Alan Edgar Poe. He used to say that I mean, poetry is something which um, uh, uh, I mean, he gave this definition to literature, that literature is something which is a news which remains news. Okay, so you want to read only uh, morning newspaper. If you find somebody reading 10 days old newspaper, or last week newspaper, you will laugh at it. Okay, so newspaper is not something which remains relevant. Only for researchers it can be relevant, but not for ordinary people. Okay, nobody will buy a newspaper, yesterday's newspaper. But then he says that literature or poetry is something which I mean, news that stays news, means it is always fresh. It always appears warm. It always gives you that kind of freshness, as if it has been prepared just now. So these are the aspects of poetry which are created by a writer. And how do they do that? I'll give you some examples. Okay, uh, there is a poem, and I like this poem. It's a very small poem, hardly you know hardly a line. And this is Christ, our Christ, a pin cushion. Now look at this. The first line is Christ. The second line is our Christ, Christ, our Christ. And the third line is our Christ is our Christ a pin cushion. Not even a verb has been used. So Christ has been used thrice, R has been used twice, and then a pin cushion. So there are only 5 words actually in this entire poem, just 5 words. And he has created a magic. Christ, our Christ, pin cushion. So uh, uh, it's a political poem, very, very, I mean, sharp political poem that people have used religion or Christ, the image of Christ, for their own benefits, and they use it as if it is a pin cushion, and anybody comes who pierces a pin into it and uses Christ for his or her own benefit. Okay, so such a beautiful idea, and it will remain. I'm telling you, it's such a powerful thing. So poem can be created out of just 5 words. Okay, and even if you spend 100 words, you may not be able to write a single line which is worthwhile. And I'm quoting another poem which is by uh, Japanese poet Basho, again uh, 16th century poet. The old pond, a frog jumps in, plop. Okay, so an old and the old pond, a frog jumps in, plop. So he creates. I mean, he looks at an incident where a frog takes a jump into the pond and creates a sound. So he captures that image. Okay, so at one in the first poem, I gave you an example of how. A poem can be created out of our concern, out of a thought, and in the second you see an image. Okay, so that can also be done. And then emotional responses. Yes, I mean, all poems you see the emotional response. So as a poet, what is important for us? Um, the material is there. Most of the time we know. Uh, I can give you examples from Urdu शेर हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश कदम निकले बहुत निकले मेरे अरमान लेकिन फिर भी कम निकले. So when you know read these lines, this couplet, and it sounds uh, so beautiful. I mean, so and it also creates a meaning, which is something which cannot be grabbed. Okay, so easy. I mean, there can be interpretation. So poetry, what we do there. I mean, there are simple lines. Okay, but these simple lines are arranged in such a way that they create meaning uh, more than an ordinary line can create. Okay, so this is the ultimate target of a poet, because poet has an audience, and he's a serious person. He's somebody who has studied a lot. He thinks about society, and he wants people to listen to him because he has a voice. Okay, a sane voice, an important voice. So then how would I mean, he has to use certain metaphors, a language which can grab the attention of the other people, and he has to uh, uh, you know uh, weave all these words in such a way that they also have some kind of music when you read them. Okay, otherwise, if there are these are coarse lines, if they are uh, extremely ordinary lines, then that music cannot be created. Okay, there have been poets who say that we should use ordinary speech. Okay, Wordsworth was one of those poets who used to say that. But then poet, because they are trained people, they read thousands of poets and poetry all the time, so that ordinary of uh, the ordinary language that they say or they use in their poems, uh, uh, it does not remain that ordinary. Okay, there is a system. Okay, so there are certain forms like ghazal which requires a certain kind of training if you are writing in in chand, in sorata, in Hindi also, doha or any kind of form, or in English, if you are writing a lyric poem or a sonnet or something, then these are forms actually. Then you have to adhere or stick to the form, and so it requires a lot of training. But even if you are writing in blank verse, free verse, okay, uh, uh, even then the challenge is there, and you have to create something. Though you have आपने जैसे कहना चाहिए कि जो जो फॉर्म है वो छोड़ दिया है, अगर आप मुक्त छंद में लिख रहे हैं, फ्री वर्स में लिख रहे हैं, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि पूरी तरह से फ्री है वो कविता, और आप कुछ भी मतलब कह सकते हैं, कुछ भी कर सकते हैं। उसका एक अपना रिदम है, जो जो प्रोज जैसी पोइम्स हमें दिखती हैं, उनका अपना एक रिदम है, और वो रिदम पाना बहुत जरूरी है। तो कई बार राइम को हमने छोड़ दिया है इन मॉडर्न पोइट्री। वी डू नॉट फोकस too much on rhyme, okay, because then it creates a lot of problem. Today we focus more on expressing particular kind of idea. Idea is more important. So and if we are focusing on expressing the idea, then rhyme creates an unnecessary problems, okay, and sometimes it may not be possible to express something using rhymes, or it may look very ordinary or awkward sometimes, okay. So but then how can we create poetry if certain uh, aspects of poetry are not there? Then definitely rhythm is an important thing. So rhythm means there is a certain flow in which the sentence moves, okay. The sound patterns move. So this has to be focused, okay. uh, so this is one. And what I feel, as a poet, when I write, uh, that I should be able to first uh, express the idea that I have. If something strikes me, and then if I write, then my effort or my uh, attempt is to complete that idea, okay, present it in its complexity. So I am saying it in complexity because it is difficult to get at the reality, okay. So because reality is a kind of scheme, is a kind of complex thing. So it is very simple to give formulations in poetry, and one should avoid actually simplifications or formulations. It is something which one should always stick to. Okay, so there can't be any simplification, there can't be any formulation, a simple formulation. Okay, so because then if you are doing that, then it is better to write a prose piece than writing a poetic piece. Okay, so oversimplification or simple statement should be avoided at any cost. So you when you see something, then you crave to express that in your own words. Then there are certain concerns also, that what will be the response of the people who read this, okay, because you are not writing something for your own. Right? Initially when we start writing, we may be writing for our own satisfaction. हम कहते हैं ना कि हम अपने अपने सुख के लिए लिख रहे हैं, लेकिन ऐसा होता नहीं है. There is an imagined reader always, okay. That reader may be your own self, or that reader may be an imagined reader, and that reader is always there, okay. So if you do not have an imagined reader in front of you, then you cannot write properly, okay, because then you are not writing for anybody, so then effort will not be there. So if you are actually writing for somebody, and if you need some kind of approval from that person, approval not in the sense that you will get marks, but approval that you have created something beautiful, okay. सो जैसे वाह वाह करते हैं, हम दाग देते हैं, सो वो दाग दाद जो मिलती है हमको, वो तभी संभव है जब हम कुछ ऐसा कहें जो पहले सुना ना हो उसको लगे कि अरे ये तो बहुत खूबसूरत बात कही गई है, ये अंदाजे जो बयां है ये बहुत खूबसूरत है। तो जो उर्दू पोइट्री है, जो हिंदी पोइट्री थोड़ा डिफर करती है उससे, लेकिन उर्दू पोइट्री में जैसा गालिब कहते हैं कि बहुत सारे लोग कहने वाले हैं, लेकिन गालिब का जो अंदाजे बयां है वो कुछ और है। तो मतलब कि जो रेंडरिंग है पोइट्री की, द वे इट हैज बीन एक्सप्रेस्ड द इन लाइन्स इज समथिंग डिफरेंट। ओके, सो हमें मतलब जो ध्यान देना है वो ये कि हम क्या कहने जा रहे हैं, कैसे कहने जा रहे हैं, और क्या हमने पूरे जो आइडिया है, जो किसी भी चीज का जो तसव्वुर है उसको सही से ग्रेस्प कर लिया है या नहीं कर लिया है। समटाइम्स मैंने महसूस किया है कि इवन व्हेन यू स्टार्ट राइटिंग, you are not sure about what you are going to write. Okay, so that creates a lot of problem. So first you should be sure that this is the thing that you are actually planning to write. And but at the same time, I must say, as you grow experienced, as you develop as a poet, uh, the process of writing also changes. uh, for me, I'm telling you very frankly, I do not know where the poem will lead me. I'm telling you 100% sure. I am not sure. I mean, there is a flicker, something strikes me, and that light is there in my mind that I must write something on. Okay, so then rather the words lead me towards the end, towards a particular formation. So you should. I mean, it is also possible that you should allow some kind of unmotivated, you know, flow of words, a situation where words lead you, words or take you to a particular destination. Because words, देखो, जब आप एक शब्द का इस्तेमाल करते हैं, कोई कोई भी आप देखें, मैंने देखा है कि हम जब एक शब्द का कोई इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो उसी से मिलता जुलता दूसरा शब्द कहीं और से वो आता है, और एक शब्द को हटाते हैं तो हमें कई शब्द और हटाने पड़ते हैं। मैंने ये देखा, और मैंने ये भी देखा कि जो कंक्लूजन्स होते हैं वो इतने अनएक्सपेक्टेड होते हैं कि वो आपको नहीं पता होते हैं। तो ये बहुत जो एलिमेंट ऑफ अनएक्सपेक्टेंसी है, ये पोइट्री में बहुत जरूरी है, कि आपको खुद को भी नहीं पता है कि ये कहाँ जा रही है। ऐसा नहीं कि कुछ ऐसी चीज आ जाएगी जो बहुत इलॉजिकल होगी और मतलब इरेशनल किस्म की चीज होगी, लेकिन उसकी जो रैशनैलिटी है या उसका जो पूरा जो 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 पूरा प्लॉट जो है, जिस तरह से कही जा रही है बात, वो आपको भी स्ट्राइक करेगी, आप भी सरप्राइज हो जाएंगे कि ये क्या हुआ, this is something new. So if this doesn't happen to the poet himself or herself, then it is difficult uh, to create something which will astonish or which will uh, have an impact on the reader. So always experiment with your words, always experiment with your lines and images, and try to create images, try to bring images which can best express your thoughts, your mental state or your feelings. Okay, and one more thing, which is I think is extremely important for poet, is to uh, edit your poems. Okay, and you can edit your poems only if you have read, thoroughly. If you have not read thoroughly, if you are not aware of what is happening right now, if suppose I'm not aware of what kind of poetry, what kind of poems are being written right now in Hindi or in English, then my editing capability will be restricted. Okay, I'll not be able to create something modern, something which will appeal to the reader of today. Okay, so it means you should be aware of the tradition. You should be aware of the old poets. At the same time, you should also be aware of the latest trends, what is happening. Okay, so these are important things. And then editing, by editing I mean uh, reducing the space. Okay, पोइट्री जो है वो कम में कहने की कला है दरअसल. It is an art in of saying something in less. Okay, so if you use too many words, if you I mean, ये खर्च करना हुआ, जैसे कहीं अगर 5 रुपए में से काम चल सकता हो और उसके लिए आपने 50 रुपए या 500 रुपए खर्च किए हैं, तो आपको घर पे डांट पड़ेगी कि भाई ये क्या किया आपने, इस तरह की इतनी पैसे खर्च कर दिए, तो वर्थ ही नहीं है इसकी। तो पोइट्री में भी इसी तरह का मामला है कि पोइट्री में आप एक ऐसी बात कहें, कबीर को ले लीजिए आप, कबीर कितने, मतलब आप किसी भी पोइट को, बड़े से बड़े पोइट को आप लेंगे तो आपको लगेगा कि वो आज भी क्यों रेलेवेंट है, क्योंकि वो हमारी उन बातों को, जिनको कि हमें लगता है कि इम्पॉर्टेंट हैं, उन बातों को कहने का सलीका उसके पास है, और उनको इतनी पिथीली वो कह रहा है, इतने शॉर्ट में वो कह रहा है कि हर एक को लगता है कि नहीं, ये बात आसानी से कही जा सकती है। ओके, तो पोइट्री की ये कुछ चीजें हैं जिन्हें हमें ध्यान में रखना चाहिए। हमें हमारी एक और चीज बात ये कि जो जो पोइट्री की जो लैंग्वेज हो, वो थोड़ी उसकी लैंग्वेज से मतलब है कि जिस तरह की शब्दों का वो इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, वो शब्द पुराने ढर्रे के ना हो, है ना। अलग अलग पीरियड में अलग अलग तरह के लैंग्वेज का इस्तेमाल किया जाता है। जैसे हिंदी में देखें तो छायावादी लोग थे, मतलब कुछ अलग तरह की पोएम्स थी, अगर उन्हें आप पढ़ेंगे तो वो आपको इम्प्रेस ही नहीं करेंगी। जैसे हिंदी फिल्म्स में आप लें कि आप डिफरेंट तरह के सॉन्ग्स लिखे जाते हैं। आज से 25 साल पहले कुछ और लिखा जाता था, उससे 50 साल पहले कुछ और लिखा जाता था। तो आज अगर वो 50 साल पुराने वाले सॉन्ग्स अगर उसी तरह से पेश किए जाएंगे तो आप नहीं सुनेंगे, वो नहीं सुनते भी हैं। ओके, तो ये क्यों होता है? क्योंकि उनमें उतनी कैपेबिलिटी नहीं है कि वो आज 50 साल बाद के रीडर को एड्रेस कर सके। ओके, लेकिन बहुत सारे बड़े राइटर्स ऐसे, जैसे ब्रेख्त को लें हम, जो जर्मन पोइट हैं, बर्टल ब्रेश्ट, तो उनको अगर लें हम तो उनकी आज भी कविताएं हमें इतना प्रभावित करती हैं, या दूसरे लोग हैं। तो वो लैंग्वेज पे डिपेंड करता है कि आपने लैंग्वेज किस तरह की इस्तेमाल की है, और उसमें कितनी दूर तक जाने की ताकत है। क्या वो जिंदा रह पाएगी भाषा, या नहीं रह पाएगी भाषा? ओके, और हमने किस तरह के मेटाफर्स का इस्तेमाल किया है, किस तरह की वर्ड्स का इस्तेमाल किया। तो पोइट्री में एक चीज और मैं आपको कहूँ कि हमें कोशिश ये करनी चाहिए कि सॉलिड वर्ड्स का इस्तेमाल हो, मतलब नाउन्स और वर्ब्स जो हैं वो ज्यादा से ज्यादा इस्तेमाल हो, बल्कि मतलब जो एडजेक्टिव्स हैं, जो जो एडवर्ब्स हैं, उनको कम इस्तेमाल किया जाए, और ज्यादा जो ठोस सॉलिड वर्ड्स हैं, जो नाउन्स हैं, उनको ज्यादा इस्तेमाल किया जाए। तो और जो वर्ब्स हैं उनको ज्यादा इस्तेमाल किया जाए। तो हमें, जैसे मैंने छोटा सा पढ़ा था, क्राइस्ट ओवर क्राइस्ट ओवर क्राइस्ट इन क्वेश्चन, तो आप देखें कि कुछ है ही नहीं, मतलब किसी तरह का इसमें कोई एडजेक्टिव नहीं है, कोई एडवर्ब नहीं है ना, एक जस्ट अ सिंपल लाइन, एंड इट इज सच ए पावरफुल लाइन। ओके, सो ये कुछ इस तरह की बातें हैं जो पोइट को इस्तेमाल मतलब करनी चाहिए। तो ये मोटी मोटी बातें मुझे लगता है कि मैंने पोइट्री के बारे में। सो मैं चाहूंगा कि आप लोग, अगर कोई सवाल हैं आपके, तो उनके जवाब देते हुए मुझे और अच्छा लगेगा, और देन आई कैन ऑल्सो एलाबोरेट। सो वट एवर आई सेड, I've taken around 40 odd minutes. Okay, so 30 to 5. Okay, so if you have any question, then we can discuss that question. Is that fine?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so as the speaker has, in a very detailed manner, he has given us a picture of what all we need to keep in mind, as in to write a good poem, or at least to make an attempt to write or express your feelings in a poetic way. So thank you, sir, for this amazing presentation. And you have touched upon many aspects, and I'm sure that it has helped the audience also to think along those lines. And now the floor is open for questions or comments. Right? I mean, whatever you feel like sharing. तो अगर आपके कोई अभी प्रश्न हो या फिर कमेंट्स है तो प्लीज आप अपना माइक unmute करके you can ask the speaker, or otherwise any comment would also be good, because our speaker had a problem not seeing the audience. So if you can just kind of switch on the camera and then
I think this, somebody has raised a hand or what? No, it's me actually. I saw that this hand. So,
Yeah, sir. Yeah. Yeah, there'll be questions. So we'll wait and see. Like, you can mute and then switch on the camera and ask. Was Kirtana saying something? I mean, there's a person named Kirtana. I think in between there was something from that side. Or anybody else?
because workshop is something which needs something hands-on experience. Okay, so if you people don't engage, because it's not a lecture actually. I wanted to ask you questions to begin with actually. So, but I didn't do that because it's a medium which creates some obstacles. Okay, so but now if there is a question, then I would be happy to uh, do that. There
So
is
can
some
you see the
question.
comment box? Yes, yes.
Uh,
I mean, the person has network problems, so she has typed her question. So are you
yeah,
able
I
to
can.
see?
Okay. What is that question? So, can you please tell us how to organize our thoughts to be to discuss? Yes, it's a good question. Okay. So, yes, and it is actually a challenge. Okay. It is a challenge you will not believe to me also. So, now she has asked how would we organize our thoughts to write a poem. Okay, so ultimately, if poem revolves around some idea, okay, so it is. I mean, the way you collect data for anything, for any activity, for writing a research paper. Okay, so here the data change. Uh, is different in nature. Okay, you have to collect different kind of information for poetry. Okay, you are not supposed to give uh, some chart or something. Okay, but something which you feel is important to uh, carry your idea, forward. Okay, take it forward. So uh, if you intend to write a poem, then read something on that matter. Okay, and if you feel that now sufficient matter has been collected, then collect that thing on page, and then start editing. Okay, so not everything that you collect will be important. Okay, so there will be something important, something not important, then you can leave out the unimportant thing, and then you see whether whatever you have uh, saved from the earlier draft is making some sense as a poem. Okay, and if it's still not making some sense, then you have to uh, go further, edit it from different dimensions. So the dimension, the thought dimension is one, then emotional dimension, emotional appeal is also important, and the language part is also the third dimension. So you have to see whether the 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 piece that you have written down is making an emotional, a coherent emotional appeal. Coherent means there has to be a clear link when the moment you start and the moment you end the poem. So there has to be link of of idea, of language, of emotions. Okay, so it has to be woven in such a way that all these three, they connect and they remain constant in the poem. Okay, so and there is no I mean it's not loose, it's not जैसे कहते हैं ढीली हो गई है, लचक रही है. So it should be always tight. Okay, so that you have to, and how can you achieve that? For that, you have to read the poems that you like of great writers. Okay, and you have to not read them as a reader, but as a writer, as an apprentice who intends to write. Okay, you read between the lines, read each and every word, why a particular word has been used, not anything else. Okay, because writer is somebody who is extremely conscious of using a single, word. I'm telling you, I cannot tolerate a single extra matra in my poem, and you cannot remove anything from there. So, writers are extremely conscious of language. So, why did they use something and not use something else? Okay, instead. So, that has to be seen. So, when you have certain images in your mind, when you have certain models in your mind, then you will, you know, uh, weave your own poems around them, like them. Okay, and in the process, in the beginning, you will be like creating poems which will be prototype of some writers. Some, they will be bearing of some writers on them. But after some time, you will gradually detach yourself and be an independent writer in your own right. Okay, so this is how we do that. Is this clear? In making some sense?
Yes, sir, I think so. And Kirtana, maybe yes, she
Okay.
responded in the comment box. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
others
so
are
taking from this, I have a question like
yeah,
related to taking from what, yeah. Okay,
devices
Rohit has
like.
asked a question, so maybe I'll keep the question towards the end. Another question is there in the comment box.
Yeah, I mean, the question asks whether we can use a metaphor like personification or definitely, I mean, metaphors or any devices are there to enhance the impact of the poem. Okay, so if it enhances the impact, you have to use it. Okay, but to judge this, to evaluate whether it is enhancing or not enhancing, you have to be an avid reader. Okay, so reading, I'm telling you, is an extremely important part. If you don't read poetry, then you cannot write. So it is as simple as this. Yes, ma'am, you were asking something.
Yeah, yes, yeah, Rohit has also responded. So, sir, mine was a simple question as in what makes a good poet? Is it a training or the kind of effort which you're putting in, like reading or making such efforts? Or is it something like an inborn talent, a flair of writing poetry, which then you develop? So,
Well, see, it is very difficult to say that a writer was born with any kind of talent. Okay, because there is no writer who has become a writer without working really hard. And those who have not been not have become writers, I mean, there may be some people who are lost completely. Okay, and we could never recognize, we could never know that they were writers. So of writers of the writers, no, are only those who have really worked hard. Okay, so training is an important part. There may be something inherent in you. So I mean, the moment we say that you like poems or like any form of creative art, it means there is something in you, some worm is there actually. Okay, which is nagging at you all the time, which is forcing you to move in a particular direction. Okay, so if you are a musician, then there is something new which forces you to go in that direction. So if you have come to this fold, it means there is something, but then that something has to be developed. It has to be uh, uh, it has to be I mean, it should be given proper space, proper training, proper nourishment, proper nurturing. Only then you can think of writing. In Urdu, it is said that one can be I mean, one can become eligible for saying a share only if you have memorized 10,000 shares. Okay, so अब जब आप 10,000 याद कर लेंगे, इसका मतलब आपको उसकी जो पूरी जो nuances हैं और उसका जो फ्लो है लाइन का, वो याद आ जाए, मतलब याद हो जाएगा फौरन से। तो वो आपके मतलब it will become an inherent part of your thought process. So the moment you will say something, it will be in the form of a गजल और अ शेर। तो ज्यादा जरूरी जो काम है वो है ट्रेनिंग। हमें नहीं पता कि हम इनबॉर्न हैं टैलेंट के साथ या नहीं है। ओके, लेकिन हमें इतना पता है कि हमें इंटरेस्ट है, एंड दैट इंटरेस्ट कैन बिकम रिकॉग्नाइजेबल ओनली व्हेन वी नरिश इट। ओके, क्योंकि कोई भी पौधा जो है वो जब तक बड़ा दरख्त नहीं बनता है तब तक वो और बड़ा बड़ा दरख्त हम पानी लगाएंगे, उसे बचाएंगे, कोई कोई मतलब जानवर ना खा जाए उसको, कोई तोड़ ना दे। सो सम प्रोटेक्शन हैज टू बी गिवन। आई मीन वी हैव टू अलाउ दैट sapling to grow, to get that size. So this is what I feel. I mean, like any uh, art form, like painting or music or any dance or whatever, poetry requires rigorous training and language and thought. Okay, so this is what I feel.
Uh,
Yeah. Thank
Sonu?
Yes.
Sonu, shall I ask?
Yes,
Yeah, please,
Shashita.
please,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, it was a good talk altogether. But I've got and directly coming to the competition part. Okay, as far as our competition is concerned, the unfortunate thing is that we, put them in a cage, give them a subject, and ask them to write. I know for a poet, for a story writer, for for anybody who is to do creative writing, this is a punishment. Okay, still, that's the thing. So, in that case, you are put in a cage and given a subject to write about, and what should be our approach to that thing? One, the theme, one, the content, as well the title, etc. So, when you are in a competition, how to approach the thing? If you can elaborate on that, I think that would be a good thing for this workshop. Sorry.
Okay, thank. No, no, it's an important question, and it's a practical, question, practical problem. Okay, so let me tell you, sir, Sashi, if I'm not wrong, uh, it is never a punishment to ask somebody to write on a topic. Okay, I have been doing it for more than 20 years. I ask my friends, you will not believe, to tell me the topic on which I have to write. Okay. And people have been asking me and I have been writing. So it is a challenge because then it becomes restrictive. I mean, for a person to imagine to write something that I mean that has been prescribed to you. Okay, but if you have honed your capabilities as a writer, as a poet, and if you know where to see a poem, because see, poem is not in words. Poem is there kept inside, language in between the words. Okay, so it is like a light actually, which we keep uh, within a poem. Okay, so if you know how to trace that light out of nowhere, then you can take up any topic, any given topic, no matter how difficult or how silly it is. Okay, I remember a friend of mine. We were having. I was doing some refresher course long time back in JNU, and I mean during the day we were four of us were having lunch. Okay, in one of the hostels. So there was I mean, on the table there was some green chilies kept there in a glass. Okay, so my friend had not seen any kind of anything like this. So she was amazed that, and then she said that I mean it's how beautiful it is. The chilies have been kept like this, and I never saw such a thing. So then jokingly she says that would you not? I mean, would you mind writing something on this? And all of a sudden, the moment she said this, that write something on Mirch. Okay. So, I mean, it's such a silly, for anybody, it's such a silly thing to think of this challenge. So, but then I accepted it because I had this kind of training, and I immediately, next day, I came up with certain lines. Okay. And then, uh, next very next day I told her that these are the lines which somehow struck me, and I'm going to build this poem in this direction. So when I read those lines, he said that yeah, I mean, she's satisfied, uh, and I mean, she was amazed. Okay, to and you will not believe, I worked on that poem. It took me long time, definitely. I prepared the first draft, and I kept the draft, did not touch it for months. And after that, I picked it up and started working on that. So it turned out to be a long poem. Long means almost three page poem, and that is one of my best poems. Okay, so it all depends on how you actually see things. Okay, whether you have the capability of taking out the poetic material out of our ordinary life. Okay, so I've been writing poems on very ordinary things. Okay, I'll read something. I mean, it is in Hindi. I'll read a poem which is uh, on Golgappa. Okay, such an ordinary thing. Okay, so I mean, you can hardly imagine something uh, written on a pani puri. Uh, okay, I've written a poem, and now you can see how one has to take up this challenge of writing uh, uh, poetically about anything. Okay, so I'll read out this pani puri. ख्वाब के अरमानों सी फूलती हैं वे, ख्वाब के अरमानों सी फूलती हैं वे, खौलती कढ़ाई के अंदर, और सहेज के रख लेती हैं अपने भीतर का खालीपन, अपने हिस्से का खालीपन अपने भीतर, और चल पड़ती हैं धुंधियाते दम घोंटू रसोई घरों की चौखटों के पार, तंग गलियों से होती पथरीले चौराहों की ओर, थोड़े मीठे थोड़े नमकीन, थोड़े चटपटे ख्वाब अनाड़ी आंखों में सजोए, ढकेलों की पुरानी चालों पे हिचकोले खाती। बाजार की सौदेबाज निगाहें ताड़ती हैं उन्हें, वक्तियां कसती हैं गठीले शरीरों के करारेपन पे, मगर चलती जाती हैं वे इतिहास की फीकी सुरंगों से थोड़ा नमक लिए, कि कड़कड़ाकर टूटने से भी नहीं डरती, खिलखिलाती हुई गुम हो जाती हैं पानी पूरियां हमारे मिजाजों का जायका बदलने। Okay, so this is a poem which I wrote on pani puri, which is a very ordinary thing, which uh, I mean does not seem appropriate subject for poetry. So there is nothing which is not appropriate for poetry, and there is nothing which cannot be said in poetry. Okay, so it is absolutely fine if you give subject uh, uh, to your kids. Okay, but then at the same time they should also be made aware of how to take up this challenge and how to handle the material. Okay, the entire thought process. Okay, so that is actually the more important. The skill has to be there, the ball is there, but how to kick it is more important. Okay, so it can be done only by giving them examples of good poems. Okay, there are poems on frogs, there are poems on vultures, on all kinds of trees and roads, and all everything has been dealt poetically. So children should be made aware of the ways in which a poet approaches to to the material. Okay, so that is more important. Okay, and okay, how to approach? Uh, well, it can be done only uh, through illustrations. Okay, uh, this is a bigger, I mean, a matter of actual workshop. Okay, so where we can showcase a particular example and then discuss different aspects and uh, so I mean, roughly, if I tell you something, that very thing which strikes you to think about something is actually the starting point. The poem has to be started from that very you know uh, idea or angle which provoked you to think or to look at it. Are you getting my point? If you have seen something on the road happening and if it has caught your attention, so focus on that very thing which has caught your attention. And if you are able to capture that in words, okay, and if you can build upon it, so the entire training comes into force actually. Okay, so I think मोटे मोटे तौर पे this is the answer to the question that Mr. Sashi asked. And there was another question, I couldn't read that. It is a long question. I'll read it. You have well explained as to what aspects and writing. It was very informative. Okay. You mentioned that rhythms are important. Good thing. Do you also advise the children who are going to complete our event that imagination, subjects, creation are also important while approaching to it? Yes, see, I did not use the word imagination, but see, the idea, when I'm saying idea or thought, it involves actually um, an imaginative thought. It is not a routine thought. It is not something which is ordinary. Okay, I mean, the way you conceptualize a thing, uh, it has to be new. When I was saying that uh, it is a news which remains news, means the newness is important. Okay, and if you are able to create a newness which will remain like that, then that is imagination. So imagination is extremely important, but then that imagination has to be uh, properly grounded also. I mean, it should not be away from our actual realities. It should be rather come out of the realities that we face, we encounter in our day-to-day world. And to the question which Mr. Sashi asked, I can say, there are writers who write, like I know two volumes have been compiled on the farmers protest, on the Kisan Andolan in Delhi. So it means there are writers. I have also written several poems and they have been translated into different languages and they are part of the anthologies also. So it means there are immediate objects, immediate uh, 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 things that should be depicted in your poem. You have to treat new subjects, and though the dictation is not there, the classroom situation is not there, but the world is telling the writer that you are supposed to write on this matter. Okay, so it's not that writer does not take up this challenge, or a poem which appears or takes birth is coming out of nowhere. No, it's not that. It is actually a sustained effort, a product of sustained effort that writer has taken, responding to the events or whatever things are happening in the world. Okay, so I mean, whatever you asked is actually what happens in a writer's life. Though people don't tell me that you write on this, not always, but then the world tells me that you are supposed to write on this. Okay, there are risks involved, but then you have to write. Okay, so most of us, so, and I consider that if you are a writer, then you should take up social issues, issues of women, issues of farmers, issues of laborers, issues of injustice. Okay, so injustice is the area that writer focuses on. That wherever something wrong is being done to people, writer goes there and stands by. Okay, so I think I'm able to. Mr. James, so what's his name? He's also
Yes,
raising
yes.
his hand. James,
Uh,
yes.
Yes, sir.
So
Just one small doubt, like as a poet, you have written so many poems, and ever it has occurred that, you conceived an idea, you put it into the paper, and you thought, okay, it is complete. And on a later day, when you went through the same poem, you have you ever thought, I'd have done better? Or in if such thing happens, uh, does the poet has the no, of course it's his own creation, so he has the right to rewrite it or modify it. Has it ever happened to you?
yes, sir, it happens all the time with me. Even with poems which have been published, I make additions. Okay, so and because you grow as an individual, you grow as an intellectual, you grow as a writer. Okay, so all the dimensions that a writer has, you grow with your age. Okay, you become more mature if you have been putting the efforts that are needed. Okay, so your response or your जैसे कहते हैं नजर the way you look at something, so that also matures. Okay, so it means something which was written 10 years back will look immature now, so then you would like to you know edit some parts and would like to rephrase it. So it happens with me, and it happens with all the writers, because when we publish our poetry collections, so it is a work of suppose say 5 years or 10 years. So when the final copy, the final printout appears, then this work of editing also starts. Okay, because if something was written 10 years back, then you feel that there are words which not uh, uh, don't look nice, or there are some expressions which look immature or something, so then you keep editing. So I think writer actually, if I can say this, writer belongs uh, in the editing area part. If you can edit, if you have the capability of making improvements in your own writing, only then you can be called a writer. Okay, you can be called alive. And if you lose that capability of improving your own stuff, then you are gone. So a writer is a person who has the capability of editing. It is extremely, extremely important. Thanks for asking.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, we have time constraints too. So, I think, like, it seems like there are more comments and people do want to share their thoughts too. But then, due to time constraint and the time is up, so we'll have to conclude. So, yeah, I thought that if you weren't reciting a poem, the last thing I thought to request you to kind of share a poem of yours with us, but you have already done it. And I must say that it was very refreshing. बहुत मजा आया आपको सुन के और ऐसा लगा कि मतलब instead of bringing in, sometimes you must kind of bring in these small things which which makes you feel good, and that too is a purpose. Definitely bigger things are to be brought in, social issues are to be brought in, but then these kind of poems has a beauty which makes you feel something very different, and it feels good to listen to. So thank you, sir, for sharing that poem with us. And yeah, so on behalf of Janasamskriti, we express our gratitude and thanks for like giving us your time and taking this pain to kind of come, and then with the constraints which the online medium has, uh, I mean, you have still managed to kind of tell us many important things. So yeah, we are very thankful to you for that, and I hope that the kind of questions and the comments which were coming in, आगे अगर ऑफलाइन भी कभी अगर जैसे आपके कन्वीनियंस पे जब भी जैसे टाइम मिलता है तो we look forward to have an interaction of that manner where youngsters can be brought in and then they'll also get a chance to interact. Yeah. So thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. And in fact, I mean, it is refreshing, always refreshing to talk about poetry. I tell you, I have been traveling for last 3 days continuously. Even today, I drove a long distance, but now I'm feeling much relieved, as if I'm completely fresh. So poetry is something which gives you that kind of joy. You can see it on my face that when I started, I was looking lazy and dull and okay, but now I'm fine. I'm much better, and so I mean that's why poetry is so important to live with, and I'm really happy that you gave me this opportunity. I'm thankful to Comrade Damodaran for roping me in, and I'll be glad to interact with you anytime. And if it can be done in person, it would be all the more better, because then you can talk freely. I mean, can have a face-to-face conversation, so which is extremely important. But I'm glad you called me and invited. Thanks. Comrade Balan is saying something. Is trying to say something. Please switch on your mic.
No, it's okay. It's okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. We
Okay.
enjoyed. We enjoyed.
Thanks a lot.